The house under Hollow Creek Road. On the morning Pao Vang signed the papers for the house on Hollow Creek Road, he thought he had finally done something right for his family. For years, California had felt like a hand around his throat. Every month, rent climbed higher. Gas cost more. Groceries cost more. Insurance cost more. Even breathing seemed to come with a bill. Pao was 38 years old, working long hours, coming home tired, and still feeling like he was falling behind. Mee, his wife, was 36, and she had learned how to stretch money. So far, it almost became magic. She clipped coupons, bought meat only when it was on sale, saved leftovers in plastic containers, and told the children not to ask for things she already knew they could not afford. But there were nights when Pao found her sitting at the kitchen table after everyone had gone to bed, staring at the numbers in a notebook like she was waiting for them to change. They had 3 children. Angie was 15, old enough to understand what money did to adults, and angry enough to blame the move on everyone except the bills. Scott was 8, quiet and soft-spoken, the kind of boy who noticed shadows in corners and changes in people's voices. Crystal was 4, still small enough to believe any house could become a home if her mother unpacked her blankets and her father plugged in her nightlight. When Pao first told his family they were leaving California for Oklahoma, Angie cried in her room for 2 days. Scott asked if Oklahoma had monsters. Crystal asked if they could bring the couch. Pao's older brother, Sai, had been the first one to encourage him. "You cannot keep paying California prices forever," Sai told him one Sunday after church, standing beside Pao's old truck with his arms crossed. "You work and work, but the money disappears before your hands touch it." Pao's older sister, Mai, agreed. She was practical, sharp-tongued, and protective in the way older sisters often are. "Buy land somewhere cheaper," she told him. "Even if it is far, at least it will be yours. Rent is throwing money into fire." His younger brother, Ku, was more excited than everyone else. "Oklahoma is not that bad," he said while helping Pao scroll through listings online. "Look at this one. Big house, big yard, cheap." That was the first time Pao saw the house on Hollow Creek Road. 2 stories, white siding, wraparound porch, blue shutters faded by weather, a long gravel driveway, a field behind it dry and golden, leading to a crooked line of cottonwood trees near an old creek bed. The price was so low Pao thought it was a mistake. Mee leaned over his shoulder and stared at the listing. "That is too cheap," she said. Pao nodded, but his heart was already reaching for it. Maybe it needs work. Maybe something is wrong with it. Every house has something wrong with it. Mee did not answer. In the end, the numbers made the decision for them. The house was cheap enough that if they sold what they could, empty their savings, and accepted a little help from relatives, they could buy it outright. No landlord, no rent, no California prices, just a house that belonged to them. When they loaded the moving truck, Sai came with rope, work gloves, and a quiet seriousness. Mai brought foil trays of food for the road. Coop joked too much, trying to keep Pao from crying in front of everybody. "You are doing the right thing," Sai said as he helped strap down the last mattress. Pao looked toward the apartment where his children had grown up and tried to believe him. "I hope so," he said. Mai put a hand on his shoulder. "You are giving them something stable." Pao nodded. That word stayed with him. Stable. That was all he wanted. A place where his family could breathe. The drive to Oklahoma took 2 days. They passed through desert, flat highways, cheap motels, gas stations, and long stretches of road where the sky seemed too big. Crystal slept with her stuffed rabbit pressed under her chin. Scott counted trucks. Angie wore headphones and stared out the window like she had been kidnapped. Mee tried to stay hopeful. She talked about planting herbs in the backyard. She talked about painting the kitchen. She talked about finding a Hmong community somewhere close enough to visit. Pao listened and smiled because when Mee planned, he could almost believe they had escaped. They reached the small Oklahoma town in the late afternoon. The town had 1 grocery store, 1 diner, 2 churches, a feed shop, a tire repair place, and a gas station with a bell above the door. Hollow Creek Road was 3 miles outside of town, past open fields and rusted fences, where the pavement narrowed and the houses became farther apart. When Pao turned onto the gravel driveway, Crystal woke up and pressed her face against the window. "Is that our house?" she asked. Pao smiled for the first time all day. "That is our house." The house stood at the end of the drive, white and still beneath the heavy orange light of evening. The porch wrapped around the front like open arms. The windows reflected the sky. Behind it, the tall grass swayed, though there was almost no wind. To Pao, it looked peaceful. To me, it looked lonely. To Angie, it looked like punishment. To Scott, it looked like something was watching from the upstairs window. "It's bigger than the pictures," Pao said. Mee stood beside him with Crystal on her hip. "It is too quiet. That is what we wanted." "No," Mee said softly. "We wanted peace. Quiet is different." Angie stepped out of the van and looked around at the empty road. "There's literally nothing here." "Angie," Pao said. "What?" "I'm just saying. You moved us to the middle of nowhere." Scott did not complain. He only stared at the second-floor window. Mee noticed. "Scott." He lifted one hand and pointed. "There's a lady upstairs." Everyone turned. The window was empty. Just dust on the glass. Just sunlight. Just the reflection of the sky. Pao placed a hand on Scott's shoulder. "Probably the realtor." Scott shook his head. "No." She was bending down. Then he bent his knees, lowered his head, and tilted his face upward without lifting his chin. It was an ugly position. A broken-looking position. The kind of pose a child should not know how to make. Angie rolled her eyes. "Great. First day, and Scott already made a ghost friend." Before Mee could answer, the front door opened and the realtor came out. Her name was Carol. She smiled too wide and held a clipboard against her chest like a shield. "Vang family," she called. "Welcome, welcome. You made it." Pao smiled back. Mee did not. Inside, the house smelled like lemon cleaner and something older underneath. Something damp. Something buried. The floors were hardwood, scratched but solid. The kitchen had yellow cabinets, white tile, and a back door that opened toward the field. The bedrooms upstairs were bigger than anything the children had ever had in California. Crystal ran from room to room, laughing, choosing every bedroom as hers. Scott stayed close to me. Angie stood in the doorway of the upstairs bedroom and said nothing. The price still bothered me. As Carol walked them through the house, Mee asked, "Why did the last family leave?" Carol gave a quick laugh. "Oh, they moved closer to work. And the family before them." "I would have to check records," Carol said. "People move all the time out here." Mee looked at Pao. Pao looked away. He heard her concern, but he also heard the numbers in his head. The bank account. The moving truck. The closing costs. The money they had left. Not enough to go back. Not enough to start over. This house was not just a house. It was their last chance. "We can fix it," Pao told me later after Carol left. Mee stood in the kitchen and looked toward the basement door. "A house is not only walls." "I know. Do you?" That first night, they slept in sleeping bags on the living room floor because the beds were still in the truck. Crystal fell asleep between Pao and me, her stuffed rabbit tucked under her arm. Scott slept near the couch with a nightlight plugged into the wall. Angie slept as far from everyone as possible, her back turned toward the room. Outside, crickets screamed in the tall grass. Inside, the old house settled. At 2:13 in the morning, Scott opened his eyes. The kitchen light was on. He sat up slowly. No one was in the kitchen. The cabinet above the sink was open. Then the one beside it opened. Then the next. Then the next. One by one, every cabinet door slowly swung open without a sound. Scott grabbed his blanket and whispered, "Mom." The faucet turned on. A thin stream of water hit the sink. Drip, drip, drip. Then the toilet upstairs flushed. Pao sat up fast. "Mee, I'm here," Mee said, already awake. Angie groaned from her sleeping bag. "Can everyone stop being weird?" Crystal stirred, rubbed her eyes, and whispered, "Water." Then something knocked from inside the wall behind them. 3 slow knocks. Everyone froze. Pao stood, picked up a flashlight, and aimed it at the wall. "Pipes," he said. The wall knocked back. 3 more times. Mee pulled Crystal close with one arm and reached for Scott with the other. "Pao," she whispered. "Old house," Pao said. "Old plumbing." Then from upstairs came the sound of bare feet running across the ceiling. Fast. Too fast. Back and forth. back and forth. Angie sat up, no longer annoyed. "Dad." The footsteps stopped directly above them. There was a pause. Then a child's laugh came through the ceiling. Not Scott's. Not Angie's. Not Crystal's. Younger than Angie, older than Crystal, and far away. Under it, almost too quiet to hear, an old woman whispered something in a language none of them understood. Mee began to pray under her breath. The kitchen faucet shut off by itself, and every open cabinet slammed at once. Crystal screamed. The next morning, Pao inspected everything. He checked the cabinets. He checked the pipes. He checked the toilet. He climbed into the attic and found nothing but insulation, mouse droppings, and old heat. He came down with dust in his hair and scratches on his arms. "There's no one here," he said. Mee looked at him quietly. "I know." "Then why are you looking at me like that?" "Because I believe you." Pao did not want belief. Belief meant the problem had no tool, no manual, no number to call. He wanted a loose pipe, a raccoon, bad wiring, something with a bill and an answer. For the first week, they pretended. That is what families do when fear is too expensive. They unpacked boxes. They enrolled Angie and Scott in school. Mee cleaned every room with hot water and vinegar. Pao started work at a warehouse 40 minutes away. Crystal followed me from room to room, dragging her stuffed rabbit by one ear. For a little while, the house almost behaved. In the mornings, sunlight filled the kitchen. In the afternoons, the porch felt warm. Pao fixed a loose railing. Mee lined the cabinets with paper. Angie taped pictures above her bed. Scott arranged his toy cars along the windowsill. Crystal named every corner of the house as if naming it made it safe. But every night, the house reminded them it was awake. At first, it was small. A knock behind the refrigerator. A whisper from the laundry room. The smell of wet soil in the hallway. The porch swing moving when there was no wind. Dishes rearranged in the cabinets. A line of muddy footprints appearing from the basement door to Angie's room. Each print small, narrow, and barefoot. Angie blamed Scott. "You're not funny," she snapped. "I didn't do it," Scott said. "Then why do they stop at my door?" Scott looked at the footprints, then down the hallway. "Because she likes you." Angie's face changed. "Who?" "The lady under the house." Mee dropped the cup she was holding. It shattered across the kitchen tile. Pao rushed in. "What happened?" Mee ignored the broken glass. "Scott, what did you say?" Scott looked frightened, not because of the broken cup, but because he knew he had said too much. "She said Angie is almost the right age." Nobody moved. The refrigerator hummed. Outside, a dog barked once and went silent. Pao crouched in front of Scott. "Who said that?" "The lady." "Where did you see her?" "I don't see her anymore." Mee's voice was barely above a whisper. "Then how do you know?" Scott looked toward the floor vent. "Because she talks through there." That night, Pao bought 3 night lights and a pack of cheap motion cameras from a store in town. He installed one in the kitchen, one in the hallway, one facing the stairs. At 3:04 a.m., the kitchen camera detected motion. The footage showed the refrigerator door opening by itself. A carton of milk slid forward. Then a bowl. Then a knife block turned slowly on the counter until all the handles faced the hallway. At 3:07, the hallway camera turned black. At 3:08, the stair camera captured Angie standing halfway down the steps. Her hair hung over her face. Her nightgown was damp at the bottom, as if she had walked through water. She stared toward the living room. In her arms, she held Crystal's stuffed rabbit. Pao watched the footage the next morning with his hands clenched on the table. "She was asleep," he said. "Maybe she sleepwalked." "She has never sleepwalked." People stared. "Pao." He stared at the frozen image of Angie on the stairs. "What do you want me to say? That there is a dead woman in our house?" The lights flickered. Once, twice. The kitchen cabinet above Pao opened. A single glass rolled out. It fell. Pao caught it inches from the floor. For 1 second, nobody breathed. Then, from the baby monitor Mee had kept from when Crystal was younger, a voice crackled through. They had not plugged it in. It was Angie's voice. "Dad, why did you bring us here?" Angie was upstairs. Mee ran first. Pao followed. They found Angie asleep in bed, face dry, breathing normal. Crystal's stuffed rabbit sat beside her pillow. But on the wall above Angie's bed, written in wet brown dirt, were 4 words. "She can hear me." The first police call happened the following Tuesday. Pao did not want to make it. He stood in the kitchen at 11:46 p.m., phone in his hand, watching the basement door shake in its frame. Something on the other side was hitting it. Not knocking, hitting hard. Mee held Crystal on her hip and kept Scott behind her. Angie stood at the foot of the stairs with tears in her eyes, pretending she was not crying. "Maybe someone got in," Pao said. Mee looked at the basement door. "From the basement? I don't know." The door slammed again. Scott whimpered, "Don't open it." "I'm not opening it," Pao said. Angie's voice broke. "Call somebody." So Pao called 911. Officer Stephen Miller arrived 18 minutes later, headlights sweeping across the field and porch. He was in his early 40s, broad-shouldered, with tired eyes and the careful voice of a man used to walking into other people's worst nights. "Everybody okay?" he asked. Pao pointed toward the basement. "Something is in there. Person? Animal? I don't know." Miller looked at Pao's face, then at Mee's, then at the children. Crystal hit her face against Mee's neck. Scott stared at the officer like he had been waiting for someone with a badge to make the house obey. Miller unclipped his flashlight and said, "Stay here." The banging had stopped. That somehow made it worse. Miller opened the basement door. A smell rolled out. Wet dirt. Old wood. Something sour. He went down with one hand on his radio. "Police department," he called. "If anyone's down here, make yourself known." The basement was unfinished. Stone walls. Dirt floor in places. Low beams. Old shelves. A rusted washer and dryer left by someone years before. Miller swept the flashlight across the room. Nothing. Then he saw the far wall. Fresh scratches covered the stone from floor to ceiling. Not words. Marks. Hundreds of them. Like someone had counted days with their fingernails. "Mr. Vang?" he called. Pao answered from the top of the stairs. "Yeah. You been doing work down here?" "No." Miller crouched. At the base of the wall was a shallow depression in the dirt, almost like a sinkhole. Around it, the soil looked damp. His flashlight flickered. Once, twice. Then a voice behind him whispered, "Officer." It was Mee's voice. Miller turned. No one was there. He climbed the stairs slowly, trying not to look frightened in front of the family. "I didn't find anyone," he said. Pao looked past him toward the basement door. What about the banging? Could be the door shifting from pressure. Old foundation. Animals. I get someone to look at that basement wall. Mee watched him write in his notebook. Then she said, "Did you hear someone call you?" Officer Miller stopped writing. "What?" Mee's voice dropped. "Downstairs. Did you hear my voice?" The officer looked at her. "A little too long." "No, ma'am," he said. But he had. They called him again 3 nights later. Then again the week after. Lights flickering. Doors opening. Shadows moving across windows. Cabinets slamming. The toilet flushing again and again until water overflowed across the upstairs bathroom. A voice called Scott from the basement in Mee's voice. A voice called me from Angie's room in Pao's voice. A voice called Angie from the kitchen in Scott's voice. Once, Crystal woke up laughing in the middle of the night, standing at the top of the stairs, waving into the darkness below. Mee ran to her and scooped her up. "Who were you waving to?" Mee asked. Crystal pointed down the stairs. "The grandma with dirt hair," she said. "The house learned them. It practiced them. At first, it got the voices wrong. Too flat, too breathy, too old. Then it improved." One night, Mee woke to Pao standing beside the bed. "Come downstairs," he said. She sat up. "Why?" "Crystal is crying." Mee reached for the lamp. Before she touched it, Pao shifted in bed beside her. The real Pao. Half asleep. "What is it?" he mumbled. Mee turned back. The figure beside the bed was gone, but the bedroom door was open. And from downstairs, in Crystal's tiny voice, something started crying. Angie changed first in little ways. She slept too much. Then not at all. She stopped eating meat. She complained about dirt in her mouth. She said there was a woman standing in her closet at night, holding out both hands. What does she want? Mee asked. Angie stared toward her bedroom window. She says I took her room. Pao shook his head. Nobody took anything. That's not what she says. At school, Angie's teachers called home. She had fallen asleep in class. She had drawn the same picture in every notebook, a house with long roots reaching into black soil. Under the roots were faces, dozens of faces, some angry, some crying, one smiling. When Mee asked Angie about the drawings, Angie stared at her with eyes that looked too old for 15. She doesn't like when you burn incense, Angie said. Mee went still. Who? The one with no name. How do you know she has no name? Angie's lips barely moved. Because nobody said it when they put her down there. That night, Mee called family. She called Sai first, because Pao would listen to his older brother even when he refused to listen to himself. Then she called Mai. Then Ku. Then her auntie, Si, in Minnesota. By morning, everybody knew something was wrong in the Oklahoma house. At first, Sai tried to be practical. Maybe the children are stressed, he said over speakerphone. Maybe the move was too hard. Mee did not argue. She only sent him a video from the kitchen camera. On the video, Crystal's baby monitor sat unplugged on the counter. For 20 seconds, there was only static. Then a woman's voice whispered, Pao. Sai called back 1 minute later. You need to leave that house, he said. Pao took the phone from me and walked into the hallway. With what money, he asked. Come back to California. Stay with me. And then what? Sleep with 5 people in your living room? I used everything, brother. Everything. The house, the move, the closing, the repairs. I have nothing left. Mai called next. You are being stubborn, she told him. A house can be replaced. Children cannot. Pao pressed his hand over his eyes. You think I don't know that? Then leave. I can't. You mean you won't? No, Pao said, and his voice broke. I mean I can't. Ku offered to drive down, but Pao told him to wait. Mee did not wait. She called an elder who gave her the number of a shaman named Yitao. When Pao heard the name, he did not argue. He only asked one question. How much? Mee looked at him. Our daughter is disappearing in front of us, she said. Pao nodded, ashamed. Call him. Yitao arrived on a gray Saturday afternoon with a small cloth bag, a folded black veil, ritual tools wrapped carefully, and the tired eyes of a man who had seen too many families wait too long. He was not alone. Sai had driven through the night with his wife, Panaya. Mai came with her husband, too, carrying bags of food because Hmong families do not arrive at a crisis empty-handed. Ku came too, nervous and trying to make jokes until he stepped into the house and went quiet. Mee's auntie C arrived from Minnesota with Uncle Neng, both of them solemn, both of them carrying the weight of elders who had seen old things follow families across oceans and states and generations. The house was full that evening. Shoes lined the entryway. Pots of rice and chicken sat in the kitchen. Relatives whispered in corners. Crystal clung to Auntie C. Scott stayed close to Ku. Angie sat on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, staring at the basement door. For the first time since they moved in, the house felt like it had people in it. But it did not feel safer. It felt watched. Yitao stepped inside and stopped before crossing fully through the door. He did not look at the staircase. He did not look at the family. He looked down, at the floor. How long has it been calling her? He asked. Mee swallowed. You mean Angie? No. Mee's face went pale. Yitao finally lifted his eyes. How long has the house been calling your family? Pao answered quietly. Since the first night. Then it knew you were coming before you arrived. Nobody spoke. A gust of wind moved around the outside of the house. The porch creaked. The kitchen faucet turned on. Yitao turned his head toward the sound, but he did not flinch. It wants attention, he said. Do not give it fear too easily. From the hallway, Angie said, too late. Everyone looked at her. She stood there wearing a gray hoodie, arms folded, face thin from sleepless nights. Her eyes were rimmed red. Yitao studied her. You are Angie. Sometimes. Mee whispered, "Angie." "What?" Angie said, "That's what it feels like." Yi Tao stepped closer, but not too close. "When do you feel not yourself?" "When the floor knocks back." "The floor." "At night, I knock because I think maybe someone alive is down there. And then it knocks back from under my bed." "How many times?" "3. Always 3. Angie shook her head. "No. Last night it knocked 15 times." Scott whispered, "Because she's 15. Yi Tao looked sharply at him. "Who told you that?" "The lady." "What lady?" Scott pointed to the floor. "Her head is by the kitchen." Mee began to cry silently. Pao sat down like his knees had failed. That evening, they prepared for the Yue Neeb ceremony. Mee and Auntie Si cleared the living room. Sai and Ku moved furniture against the walls. Mai took Crystal into the kitchen and tried to distract her with rice and fruit, but Crystal kept pointing toward the basement door and saying, "She's listening." Yi Tao set out bowls of water and rice. He burned spirit paper. He prepared the space carefully and told the family where to stand, what not to touch, and when not to speak. The elders stood close together. The men tried to look brave. The women prayed under their breath. Children were kept near the center of the room, away from the basement door and away from the vents. The house became very quiet. Too quiet. No pipes. No wind. No insects outside. Even the refrigerator stopped humming. Yi Tao covered his face with a dark veil. He began to chant. His voice was low at first, almost swallowed by the room. Then it grew steady and rhythmic, older than the walls around them. Scott held Ku's hand. Crystal sat in Auntie C's lap, sucking her thumb. Pao stood behind Angie with both hands on her shoulders. Angie trembled. Yi Tao moved back and forth, his body rocking with the rhythm of the journey. The floorboards under him creaked. Once, twice. Then something under the house creaked back. Yi Tao's chant faltered, just for a moment. Then he continued. The lights dimmed. Every bulb in the house glowed faint orange, like the electricity was passing through dirty water. Angie whispered, she's standing behind him. Mee tightened her hands into fists. Don't look. She's wearing mud, Angie said. Pao leaned close to her ear. Don't look, baby. She doesn't have eyes. The bowls of water began to ripple. Yi Tao's chant grew louder. Then the knocking started. Not from one wall, from every wall. 3 knocks behind me. 3 knocks above Pao. 3 knocks beneath Angie's feet. 3 knocks inside the kitchen cabinets. Then the cabinets opened. Slowly, every door. The dishes inside began to shake. Me started. Yi Tao cut her off. Do not speak to it. The kitchen faucet turned on. The upstairs toilet flushed. The front door unlocked. Click. The back door unlocked. Click. The basement door opened by itself. A cold wind pushed into the living room from below. It smelled like flooded earth, like an old grave after rain. Yi Tao threw spirit paper toward the basement door and shouted in Hmong, his voice sharp, commanding, angry. For 1 second, the house stopped. Then Angie screamed, not in fear, in pain. She bent backward so violently, Pao barely caught her. Get off me, Angie screamed. Get off me. Get off me. Me rushed forward. Angie. Yi Tao moved toward her, chanting faster. Angie's eyes rolled upward. When she spoke again, the voice was not hers. It was an old woman's voice, wet and cracked. No one fed us. Me covered her mouth. Pao shook his head, tears already falling. No. No one named us, the old voice said. Yi Tao stepped closer. Leave the child. She opened the floor. Pao shouted. She didn't open anything. She knocked. Crystal suddenly began crying in Auntie C's arms. The old woman's voice softened. Little one next. Me screamed. No. The house answered by slamming every cabinet in the kitchen. Yi Tao pressed his ritual tool near Angie's shoulder. Angie screamed again, and all the lights burst bright white. For a moment, everyone saw it. Not a woman. Not exactly. A shape crouched in the corner by the basement door. Long hair hanging in ropes of mud. Hands too thin. Mouth open too wide. Behind it, for one impossible second, The living room floor turned transparent like dark glass, and underneath the house were faces pressed upward through the soil. Men, women, children, all silent, all watching. Then the lights went out. Mee screamed. Scott cried. Crystal shrieked until Auntie C covered her ears. Pao held Angie and shouted her name over and over. When the power came back, Angie was unconscious. Yi Tao was on his knees, breathing hard. The basement door was closed again, but written across it in wet dirt were the words, "She belongs below." After the ceremony, nobody spoke for a long time. Sai stood near the kitchen with his face pale and his hands shaking. I cried silently into a dish towel. Ku sat on the floor beside Scott, one arm around the boy, staring at the basement door as if waiting for it to breathe. Yi Tao told him the truth before he left. This house is not only haunted. Pao looked exhausted. Then what is it? It is sitting on hunger. Mee wiped her face. Can you remove it? Yi Tao looked toward the basement door. I can call for help. I can ask the spirits. I can strengthen your family. But this land is wounded. Something was buried without honor. Maybe many. The house is like a mouth built over them. Sai stepped forward. Then they come with us tonight. Pao looked at his brother. No. Mai turned on him. Pao. I said no. You saw what happened, she said. Pao's voice cracked. You think I didn't see it? You think I don't know? Sai moved closer. Brother, listen to me. You have to leave. And go where? My house. For how long? A week? A month? What then? I used everything. The savings, the money from selling furniture, the help you gave me, the little me had put away. Everything is in this property. Mai's voice softened. Pao, money is not more important than your children. Pao looked like she had slapped him. I know that, he said. But being homeless will not save them either. Mee stood in the hallway, holding Crystal, listening to her husband break under the weight of all the choices that had led them there. Yi Tao looked at Angie, pale and wrapped in a blanket on the couch. Then do not let the girl sleep alone, he said. And do not let the little one near the vents. Before he stepped out, he turned back to Angie. If it speaks to you, do not answer. Angie's voice was small. What if it sounds like my mom? Still do not answer. What if it sounds like me? Yi Tao did not respond quickly enough. And that was answer enough. The next week was worse. The haunting no longer hit. At 6:12 p.m. while Mee cooked rice, every burner on the stove clicked on by itself. At 9:30, Scott's bedroom door locked from the outside while he was inside screaming. At midnight, the television turned on to static, and through the white noise came a voice singing a lullaby Mee's mother used to sing when Mee was a child. Mee unplugged the television. It kept singing. Crystal began talking to corners. At first, Mee thought it was normal. Crystal was 4. 4-year-olds talked to dolls, blankets, empty chairs, imaginary friends. But then Mee heard Crystal whisper, "No, I can't go down there." Mommy said no. Mee froze in the hallway. Crystal sat on the floor near the vent, her stuffed rabbit in her lap. After a moment, she leaned closer to the vent and whispered, "Because it's dark." Mee ran and snatched her up. From inside the vent, something whispered back in Angie's voice. "It is warm under here." Pao began sleeping in front of Angie's door with a baseball bat. He lost weight. He stopped shaving. He called electricians, plumbers, foundation repairmen. No one found anything. One old contractor stepped into the basement, looked at the stone wall, and walked back upstairs without opening his toolbox. "I'm not touching this house," the contractor said. Pao followed him outside. "Why?" "Because my granddad told me about Hollow Creek." "What about it?" The old contractor would not meet his eyes. "Ask the county." So Pao did. The county records were incomplete, but an older woman at the clerk's office took pity on him. She lowered her voice and told him the land had been many things before the house. A school quarter, a burial patch, a place where people without money, names, or family were sometimes put into the ground and forgotten. "People don't like to talk about it," the clerk said. Pao stared at the papers in front of him. Why would someone build there? Same reason people do anything they shouldn't. Money, the clerk nodded. And time? Time makes people brave and stupid. Pao asked about previous owners. The clerk printed what she could. The pattern was clear. No one stayed long. 2 years, 4 years, 18 months, 3 years. Sold, 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 sold. Always cheap, always quickly. No disclosures about hauntings. No warnings. Just signatures, closing dates, and silence. That night, Angie vanished for 11 minutes. They found her in the basement. She was standing barefoot in the dirt, facing the scratched stone wall, her hands pressed flat against it. Mee screamed her name. Angie did not turn. Pao ran down and grabbed her. Her skin was freezing. "Angie," he shouted. "Baby, look at me. She says you can't afford to love me," Angie said. Pao froze. "What?" "She says you bought the house because money mattered more." No, that's not true." "She says you traded us." Mee shook her head. "That is not Angie talking." Angie turned slightly, but her eyes were still on the wall. "She says a father always pays." Pao slapped his own chest. "Take me then." Mee grabbed his arm. "Pao, don't. You want someone." Pao shouted at the basement. "Take me." The basement went silent. Angie turned her head, not toward Pao, toward the floor. Then she smiled. She already did. The next morning, Pao called Pastor John Doe from the small church in town. Pastor John arrived that evening wearing jeans, boots, and a dark coat. He did not look like a movie priest. He looked like a man who had sat beside hospital beds, held grieving parents, and prayed in rooms where prayers did not always get the answer people wanted. "I want to say something before we begin," Pastor John said. Pao nodded. "Okay. I believe evil is real. I also believe fear can hurt a family by itself. So we're going to pray. We are going to bless this house. And if Angie needs medical help, we get that too. We do not choose one kind of help just because we are afraid of the other." Mee nodded. "We understand." Pao nodded too, though he barely heard him. He only watched Angie sitting in the corner, scratching at the inside of her wrist. Pastor John moved room to room, reading scripture, praying, touching door frames, speaking peace over bedrooms that had never known it. For a while, the house allowed it. The air warmed. The light stayed steady. Scott even stopped crying. Crystal fell asleep in Auntie C's arms. Then Pastor John reached the basement door. He placed his hand on it and said, "In the name of Jesus Christ, I command every unclean spirit, every tormenting presence, everything that has attached itself to this family, to leave this home and release this child." From upstairs, Angie began to laugh. Not loudly, not wildly, softly, like an old woman trying not to wake the dead. Pastor John closed his eyes. "Pao, yeah, bring her down." Mee stepped forward. "No." Pastor John turned to her. "Mee, listen to me. Not to the basement. Here, in the living room, in the light, with all of us." Pao carried Angie down the stairs. She was awake, but limp, her head resting against his shoulder. Her eyes were open. Too open. "Angie, baby," Pao said, "Pastor John is here." "I know," Angie whispered. Pastor John knelt in front of her. "Angie, can you hear me?" "She can." "I'm speaking to Angie." "So am I." Mee sobbed. Yi Tao returned that night because Mee called him in tears. So did Sai, Mai Ku, Auntie C, and Uncle Ning. Nobody wanted to go back inside that house, but nobody wanted the Vang family to stand alone either. By 11:40 p.m., the living room held the whole war. Pastor John with his Bible, Yi Tao with his ritual tools, Mee with Crystal wrapped against her chest, Pao kneeling in front of Angie, holding her hands so tightly his knuckles went white. Scott pressed between Ku and Sai. Mai stood behind me, one hand on her sister-in-law's shoulder. Officer Miller came because the neighbors reported screaming. He stepped inside and stopped. The floor was vibrating. Every picture on the wall shook. The kitchen cabinets opened and closed in slow rhythm. Open, close, open, close. The upstairs toilet flushed. The faucet ran. The porch swing slammed against the siding, though no wind blew outside. "What the hell?" Officer Miller started. Pastor John did not even turn around. "Officer, either leave now or stay quiet." Miller stayed. Not because he believed. Because Scott looked at him and whispered, "Please don't let her take my sister." Pastor John began to pray. Yi Tao began to chant. Two voices, two traditions, two kinds of faith standing in the same room against something older than the house and meaner than death. At first, Angie cried, "Mom, I'm scared." Mee squeezed her hand. "I'm here. I'm right here." "It's pulling my feet." Pao looked down. There were handprints around Angie's ankles. Mud handprints. Fingers pressing into her skin. "No," Pao shouted. He grabbed her legs and pulled her toward him. The house pulled back. The floorboards under Angie's feet darkened as if soaked from below. Pastor John raised his voice. "You do not have authority over this child." Yi Tao struck his rhythm harder. "Her spirit is not yours." Angie's body arched. Her mouth opened. The old woman's voice came out. "We were cold." Pastor John leaned closer. "Release her." "We were hungry." Yi Tao's voice sharpened. "Your hunger is not her burden. No one remembered us." Mee suddenly stepped forward. "I will remember you." Everyone turned to her. She was shaking, but she did not back away. "I don't know your name," Mee said. "I don't know what happened. But I will remember. I will pray. I will light incense. I will say there were people under this house. I will not forget you. But you cannot have my daughter. You cannot have my son. You cannot have my baby." For the first time, the house seemed to listen. The knocking stopped. The cabinets froze half open. The water shut off upstairs. Angie's eyes focused. "Mom." Mee fell to her knees. "Yes, baby. Come back." "There are so many," Angie whispered. "I know." "They're behind her." Mee's breath caught. "Behind who?" "The woman." Then Angie screamed so violently that Scott covered his ears. "She's not one of them." The lights blew out. In the dark, something crawled across the ceiling. Everyone heard it. Hands and knees, slow, wet, directly above them. Officer Miller lifted his flashlight. "Don't move," he said. The beam clicked on. A face stared down from the ceiling. Not human. Not anymore. Its mouth opened. Mee's voice came out. "Pao, help me." Pao almost stepped forward. Mee grabbed him. "That is not me." The thing smiled. Then it dropped. Not all the way. It stopped 6 inches above Angie, hanging in the air like it had been caught by invisible wire. Crystal woke and screamed. The thing turned its head toward her. Yi Tao shouted. Pastor John shouted. Pao pulled Angie backward. Mee grabbed Angie's face. "Look at me," Mee cried. "Look at your mother." "I can't." "Yes, you can. It knows my name." "Then say mine." "Mom, my name." Angie gasped like the word was being dragged out of her throat. "Me." "Say your father's." "Pao." "I'm here," Pao said. "Your brother." "Scott." Scott sobbed. "Angie, come home. Your baby sister." Angie's face twisted. The thing above her hissed. Mee shook her. "Say her name." Angie's eyes filled with tears. "Crystal." Crystal cried harder in Auntie C's arms. "Your name," Mee said. Angie struggled. Her mouth opened and closed like the word was hooked inside her throat. The thing above her twisted its head. "No name," it whispered. Mee screamed. "Your name." Pastor John shouted. "Say it, Angie." Yi Tao cried out. "Call your spirit back." Pao held her shoulders. "You are Angie Vang," Scott yelled. "You're my sister." Crystal, barely understanding, cried out. "Angie." That small voice broke something. Angie's eyes cleared. "I'm Angie Vang." The house screamed. Not the entity. The house. The walls screamed. The basement screamed. The pipes screamed. The dirt under the foundation screamed. The floor split open between the couch and the coffee table. Not wide, just enough for a breath of black air to rise. Inside that crack, something moved. Hands, dozens of hands, reaching upward. Pao lifted Angie off the floor. Pastor John stepped between the crack and the family. praying louder than his fear. Yi Tao threw spirit paper into the split. Mee pulled Crystal close. Sai grabbed Scott. Koo shoved the front door open. Officer Miller, pale and shaking, held it wide and shouted, "Go. Go now." Pao ran with Angie in his arms. Mee ran with Crystal. Sai carried Scott. Mai and Koo followed. Pastor John backed toward the door, still praying. Yi Tao was last. At the threshold, he turned and spoke into the house. "You were forgotten," he said, "but you are not permitted to steal the living." From deep below the floor, Angie's voice whispered back, "I'm still under here." Everyone froze. Pao looked down at the real Angie in his arms. She was unconscious, breathing, alive. Officer Miller heard the voice too. His radio captured it. That was the recording he would never delete. They did not sleep in the house again. Not one night. Officer Miller drove them to a motel off the highway. Pastor John stayed with them until sunrise. Yi Tao sat in a chair near the door and did not close his eyes. Sai and Koo took turns standing outside the motel room like they could guard the family from something that did not need doors. At 6:15 a.m., Angie woke. Mee was beside her. Pao stood at the window. Scott slept curled in a chair. Crystal slept beside Auntie C, one tiny hand still holding her rabbit. Angie looked around the motel room and began to cry. "Did I hurt anybody?" she asked. Mee stroked her hair. "No, I saw them." Pao turned from the window. "Who?" "The people under the house. Most of them were just sad. They wanted someone to know they were there." Mee asked quietly, "And the woman?" Angie shook her head. "She wasn't buried there." Pao looked confused. "What do you mean?" "She found them. Used them. Like hiding in a crowd." Yi Tao, still seated near the door, said, "A thing with no name will wear the grief of others." Pastor John looked at him. "Then what was she?" Yi Tao did not answer for a long time. Then he said, "Something that learned hunger from the dead." Pao put the house up for sale 3 days later. He did not disclose ghosts. Not because he wanted someone else to suffer. Because no form had a box for what lived under Hollow Creek Road. He wrote, "Motivated seller." He wrote as is. He wrote, "Quick close preferred." Sai offered again to take them back to California. Mai said they could stay with her. Koo offered to put everything in storage. But Mee called her relatives in Minnesota, and Auntie C said, "Come here. Start over where there is family." So that became the plan. They took almost nothing from the house. A few clothes, documents, family photos. Mee refused to take any furniture. Pao argued once. Only once. "Anything that slept in that house stays in that house," Mee said. So they left the beds, the couch, the kitchen table, the dishes, Scott's toys, Crystal's little pink chair, Angie's notebooks. On the last day, Pao returned with Officer Miller to collect the final papers from the kitchen counter. The house was quiet. Sunlight came through clean windows. Dust floated in the air. For a moment, Pao hated how normal it looked. Like it had not ruined them. Like it had not reached for his daughter from beneath the floor. Officer Miller stood at the doorway. "You sure you don't want me to come in?" he asked. "I'll be quick," Pao said. Pao stepped into the kitchen. The papers were where he left them. Beside them was Crystal's stuffed rabbit. Pao stared at it. He knew Mee had packed it. He knew because he had seen her place it in Crystal's motel bag. He picked it up with shaking fingers. The cabinet above the sink opened. Pao did not look up. "No," he whispered. Another cabinet opened. Then another. Then another. Pao backed away. The faucet turned on. A thin stream of water hit the sink. Drip, drip, drip. From the basement door came 3 knocks. Pao ran. He did not lock the door. He did not look back. The Vang family left Oklahoma before sunset. They drove north with everything they still owned packed into the back of a used van. Mee watched the road ahead. Pao drove until his hands cramped. Scott slept. Crystal slept. Angie stayed awake. Somewhere near the Kansas line, Angie whispered, "Dad?" "Yeah." "If someone buys that house, what happens to them?" Pao did not answer. Mee reached back and held Angie's hand. "We will pray for them," Mee said. Angie stared out the window. What if prayer isn't enough? Mee looked out at the dark road. "Then we tell the truth someday." They moved to Minnesota. They stayed with Auntie C and Uncle Neng at first, then found a small apartment where the pipes were loud but only pipes, where cabinet doors stayed closed, where the floor did not answer when someone dropped a spoon. Angie got better. Slowly. She laughed again. She ate again. She slept with a lamp on for almost a year, but she slept. Scott stopped talking about the lady under the house. Crystal stopped waving at empty corners. Pao worked 2 jobs. Mee lit incense for the forgotten dead every month. Not for the woman. Never for the woman. For the others. For the ones who had been buried without names. Sometimes in winter, when snow pressed against the windows and the apartment heater clicked in the night, Angie would wake at 2:13 a.m. and listen. No knocking. No whispers. No running feet. Just the quiet of a place that did not want anything from her. And that was enough. For a while. 6 months after the Vang family left, Hollow Creek Road sold again. A new family arrived in spring. They loved the price. They loved the porch. They loved the field behind the house and the old cottonwoods near the dry creek bed. On their first night, the youngest child woke after midnight and walked into the kitchen for water. The cabinets were open. All of them. The faucet was running. Drip, drip, drip. From the baby monitor on the counter, a teenage girl's voice whispered through static. "Don't sleep here." The child turned toward the hallway. A woman stood at the basement door, bent low, mud in her hair, no eyes in her face. And from somewhere under the floor, something knocked 3 times. This time, something knocked back from inside the child's chest.